Welcome to Becoming a Cook. I'm Charlie Wetzel. Today I want to teach you how to roast a pork tenderloin. It's easy and it's a wonderful dish. First thing I want to do is I want to get a little bit of rosemary because it pairs so well with pork. With rosemary, the leaves are a little bit tough, so you need to mince it pretty fine. One of the ways you can do this is you can use your knife to trim this from the stem. So you can see I'm right along the stem, and I'm just taking the leaves off. I'm trimming them as close as I can to the stem. I don't use the stem, it's a little bit tough. If you don't want to trim it that way, the other thing you can do is you can take scissors and just cut it right alongside the stem. You'll have to turn it a couple times. So I think this doesn't get it cut quite as closely because my fingers are in the way, but it does a decent job. You can see there's the scissors and there's the knife. When you start mincing rosemary, the danger is it's going to go flying everywhere because it has a little bit of a spring to it. The tighter you make this when you start, and this is true for any kind of cutting, the tighter you make it and the smaller strokes you make in the beginning, the less recutting you have to do later. If you see any big bits in there, then you can just run your knife across the other direction, and that pretty much takes care of it. And then I want to work on these pork tenderloins and season them. I start with salt, and I'm using coarse ground just because I like the finish of it. This is that coarse ground sea salt, but you can use any kind of salt. I like a coarse ground pepper on this. I used to put garlic on these as well, but the thing I found was that when you sear it in the pan, it tends to burn. So instead, I'm using garlic powder and just giving it a nice, generous shake. I'm also going to do just a little bit of cayenne pepper. With these tenderloins, you generally have to season 3 sides rather than 2 because they're a little bit triangular. The perfect amount of cayenne to me is where you barely feel it on your tongue and you're kind of saying to yourself, what was that? Anytime spicy stuff overwhelms the food, I feel like you've kind of lost a lot of what the food is. Otherwise, you might as well just eat a hot pepper. Now that I've got these done, I just want to sprinkle this lightly with this rosemary that I've minced. I can pat it in a little bit. One of the things you can do too, after you've sprinkled this everywhere, is roll these on the board, and that picks up a little bit more of the spices too. So these are ready to cook. They've been seasoned, and we're going to go over the stove now and sear them. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and sear the tenderloins before we finish them in the oven. One of the things I learned in the restaurant business is that there are a lot of things that you can start on the stovetop and then finish in the oven. The main thing is you want to get a nice sear on the outside of something before you finish it in the oven because a lot of the flavor comes from that sear. Right now I'm heating up my pan, and I'm going to show you a little trick to figuring out the temperature of your pan. If you put water in this before it's very hot, so there's a little bit of a sizzle there, but this can actually get to 1 step hotter than this, where when you put water in it, it actually beads up and the beads roll across the bottom of the pan. See that? Little beads of water moving around, and they coalesce together kind of like the Terminator 2. So I'm going to put a little olive oil in here. And you want to be careful. When you have a pan this hot, you don't want to tip the pan too much to the fire because it can actually catch that oil on fire. So I want to put my tenderloins in there. So I've left this on high heat because I want to get good color on this, but I'm going to watch it because I don't want it to burn, and it can burn pretty easily. Meanwhile, I've already preheated my oven to 350 degrees so that as soon as this is seared, I'll be ready to put it in the oven. You can see this is not ready yet. It's kind of a pale color. We want it to be brown before we turn it. And as I mentioned, when I season them, they're kind of triangular, so you have to sear them in 3 different sides rather than just 2. So this one's starting to get some good color. This is not quite ready yet. This is a larger one. So I'm going to go ahead and give this a turn. A little bit of caramelization is okay. You just don't want anything that gets too black. I'm actually going to turn this down just a hair. You notice on these tenderloins, One end is very thin and one end is very thick. You can actually fold that over and tie it with a butcher's twine, but that is a little bit of a pain. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to pull the pan so that the majority of the heat is on the thicker side of the tenderloin, and this won't get quite as much heat. I'm going to go ahead and give this a turn too. That one's got much better color. The one in the back seems to be cooking a little bit faster, so I'm going to trade them out. And I'm going to put this on that third side. Now that these have been seared, this third side will brown more in the oven on the hot pan because it's already there. I'm going to go ahead and put that in. Okay, so the pork tenderloins have been in for about 15 minutes. I'm going to go grab them and check on them. Once you've cooked these, you want to give them time to rest, because if I cut into this now, all of the juices are going to drain out of it. Resting time allows them to redistribute themselves throughout the meat. So I can let this rest for 10, even 15 minutes, and it's actually going to help me. These feel like they're about right. I'm ready to slice this. I don't ever want to cut things just dead straight because it doesn't look as pretty for the presentation. So what I want to do is just give this a little bit of an angled cut to do this as a portion. I've got some cream leeks and some polenta that I'm going to serve with this today. You can see this pork, it's very moist. There's the slightest little hint of pink, and that's okay. Most people cook pork to death and it's dry and it's not very good. I think I'm going to call this one my wife's plate. I've just got a few sun-dried tomatoes. Here it is, roasted pork tenderloin.